Hi everyone, it's Monday at 1 o'clock Eastern Time and this is Admissions Live. I'm your host Nicole Lentine, and today on the show I am speaking with a few of my friends and colleagues over at Oberlin College, Ma'ayan Plaut, Manager of Social Strategy and Projects, and Tanya, I'm sorry, I didn't get to ask Tanya how you pronounce last name. Is it Aydelott? Aydelott? Please pronounce it for me. Aydelott, thank you. Assistant Director of Admissions, and Adina Katz, a current student, is also going to join us to discuss the development and implementation of current student virtual panels. Admissions Live is part of the Higher Ed Live Network, a series of professional development web shows and podcasts, which are always free and accessible to you in the archives at higheredlive.com and on iTunes. Be part of our broadcast by tuning in live and sharing your insights and questions using the Higher Ed Live hashtag on Twitter. You can receive weekly updates with live show dates and times by subscribing to the Higher Ed Live newsletter, for which we just tweeted out a link. Today's show would not be possible without the support of Champlain College and M. Stoner. Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, a marketing and communications firm that works with education institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. Data from Ruffalo Oak, Noel, Levitt, and EduVentures show us that degree listings and pages are critically important marketing content on university pages. But how do you get more people to these pages? M. Stoner's next webinar will focus on improving traffic to degree pages through different techniques and examples. We're tweeting out a link now so you can learn more and register. Admissions Live is sponsored by Chegg Enrollment Services. Chegg Enrollment Services connects the nearly 80% of college-bound students researching schools across the web with the colleges and universities who are trying to reach them. Using an online platform that includes over 10 of the most popular college search sites online, Chegg can help you save over 90% on the cost of traditional methods for generating your inquiry pool. Email outreach@chegg.com to schedule a free consultation. So, with that, thank you and welcome to the show, Ma'ayan and Tanya. And, oh, Adina is back. Fantastic. You joined me in the middle of the sponsors. Hello. So, do each of you want to just kind of say hello and talk a little bit about what you do at Oberlin?
Sure. I will happily start. My name is Ma'ayan. I work in the communications office managing cool Oberlin internet things. I manage our third-party social media presences, and I also manage our Oberlin blogs. And of late, I actually have gotten to help with our virtual student panels, which is what we're talking about today.
Awesome. And I'm Tanya Aydelott. I'm one of the assistant directors of admissions. I read for the international team and then also for territories here in the United States as well. I get to do the social media for the admissions office, which means getting to work with a lot of our students, which is fantastic, and getting to work with Ma'ayan as well. And we actually have another virtual panel coming up this Thursday, so This is exciting as we reflect about what is going to happen in 2 days.
Yes, that's awesome. Dina.
I'm Adina Katz. I am a second-year theater and probably politics double major. I haven't declared that one yet. And I am from Seattle, Washington.
Fantastic. I'm so excited to have all the different scopes of these panels covered, and I'm excited to have you on. I think it's really timely. I know that these panels happen a few times during the year, but I think especially when we're in the midst of beautiful yield season, it's a really good time to be talking about how we're really connecting our students with our community, and I love that about these virtual panels. And I really love that when we started the conversation about these, that Ma'ayan, you were so excited because the kind of where the idea came about was coming up today, as a matter of fact. So do you want to talk about All Roads Lead to Oberlin and kind of how this story, how this whole thing came about?
Yes. So for the past couple of years, we've had admitted student groups on Facebook, kind of building an excitement starting in December for early decision applicants. It's kind of like a hub of activity and conversation and general enthusiasm about going to college. And Adina's class, the class of 2017, was one of the most fantastically social groups I had ever met. They taught me more about social media than I was doing every day with my job just by being who they were. And it actually came up during lunch one day when, I don't know if, Adina, you were actually present for that lunchtime, but after talking with some students who were early decision who came in, introduced themselves to me, they were like, everything is great, we love people, we just want to do this more. And Liz Huey, who also works here in the admissions office, and I kind of like latched onto we wish we could do more and sat down and kind of brainstormed for a little bit, like what could we do to bring the All Roads experience, our admitted students day, into the virtual space? And being being so overwhelmed and like pleased that our incoming students were teaching me so much, I decided, instead of just saying we're going to do this, propose some ideas and see what sorts of things kind of floated to the top with the students who were clearly going to need this information. So the one thing that kind of floated to the top there was I don't know who started it in the class of 2017, but someone started doing Google Hangouts. Just video chat with each other in the evenings sometimes. Whenever people were bored, they'd throw up a Google Plus link, and people could just join and talk with each other. I was really happy to see that was happening, and when I realized that enough people wanted to hear from current students, we just kind of used the technology that our incoming students were already using to figure out how to bring current students into their space as well. So we did one test panel. We hosted it on, well, we did a Google Plus Hangout. We had, I think, 6 students involved. We actually did that one a little bit differently. We allowed people to join the chat if they wanted to, and Adina actually joined that chat, which is like such a beautiful thing that she's here today. And just talked for about an hour about all sorts of questions people had. It wasn't publicized. We basically posted it in our Facebook group and had people tune in. That went over really well. We actually had someone comment in the comment section where people were sending in questions that they were signing their matriculation deposit check as they were watching the panel, which to me, like, return on investment, like, boom, we just got someone to go to college here. The next year we kind of formalized it more. We chose to do 3 panels. During All Roads Lead to Oberlin, they kind of paired up really nicely with the panels that happen here on campus. And all the data we learned from that like formal version where we emailed people and said like we're totally going to do this, we hosted it on the Oberlin blogs. And all the data we got back was like, people are definitely watching this, and we should think about what ways we can use this in different parts of the admissions process. So this fall was the first year we actually decided to do it as part of kind of like information sessions about Oberlin. If you visit campus, you're going to get to interact with students, but not everyone can visit campus. So yeah, we did 4 panels in the fall. Actually, we did 5. We did 1 bonus additional panel that was not initially planned, that was very specific about one program.
About QuestBridge. Yep.
Yeah, about the QuestBridge program. And yeah, we used all this like cool information and data and like great feedback that we got to do this spring's virtual panels. We've done 2 so far, and we have 1 more coming up. We've focused a little bit since starting, but the turnout has still been excellent. We've been getting such great questions. Like, I don't see why we would stop at this point.
And I love how much thought went into it initially and what it blossomed into. That's just so cool to see, like, let's give it a go. Oh yeah, this works. Let's keep doing this, and let's make sure that we find different reasons to do this. And I love that. And I know in kind of talking it out with you guys a little bit, you know, I phrased it as a move to virtual, but it's in support of real life events, which I think are still incredibly important. And so, do you find that, I don't know, do you find that along with accessibility that there's other really great things that have come out of having it virtually? Because of course the matriculation check is a big part of that, but I mean, you know, along with accessibility, I know you talk about archiving the videos and stuff. What else has kind of come about because of the move to virtual?
Well, one thing that I know happened actually this past weekend, this past year we've also decided to have panels specific to certain populations of students. So for one population, for example, we work with international students, and I do a lot with the international students, and we only get to go to so many countries and so many high schools. So we've had a virtual panel in the fall as well as one this past spring geared towards international students specifically. And so this past weekend, I actually had a student Facebook message me to say, I've just deposited, I'm really excited, but I still have 2 questions that didn't get answered in the last panel. Can I write to one of the students who was a panelist? And so immediately they had a Facebook connection because they were both in the class of 2019 Facebook group. And that's something that we didn't have to do. All I had to say was, yes, please write to this student and welcome to the class. And so that connection has, I think, also been really exciting for us, just to see those connections that the students are making.
The one piece for me that, like, it's a weird one to really like from the way that we've transitioned. So the first year we did it, it was only in our Facebook group, and then the last 2 years we've been hosting it on the Oberlin blogs. This is great for a lot of reasons. It gives us like better analytics, like our branding is all over it. The Oberlin blogs are a space for students to speak about their experiences, like let's have them like actually speak and not just type. But the one other piece that's important is that regardless of what social media presences you have, you can engage with the panels. In the fall, we had comments coming in on Facebook, YouTube, and also via the Oberlin blogs. It sounds like it's a little spread out, but it basically let people meet us where they were most comfortable. And the good thing that we've noticed in the spring panels, both last year and this year, if there's a question you're a little bit nervous to ask about, you can ask it because you can ask it anonymously. These tend to be questions like about drinking or like what's the party culture really like things that you don't necessarily want tied to your name or you'd feel a little bit nervous asking when your parents are there. But it's worked really well because like those are legit questions to ask about the college experience and you definitely want to know those answers before you get here.
Definitely. Yeah.
We've had a few students who've realized that they can play with that, so they've been naming themselves other things. We've had quite a few questions from Doctor Who. Which thrills me.
A few Doctor Who, some Harry Potter, maybe.
We haven't had any Harry Potters yet. We should.
Oh, see, that's my favorite. Every year when we test our CRM here at the college, it's always Harry Potter, and it gets really interesting from there. What his degree is and everything. So yeah, you got to play with Harry Potter a little bit, but no, I love that because there's so many questions that if you're shy or if you're nervous to ask it in front of your parents or if you're nervous to ask it in front of other students, I love the fact that you can source these questions from so many different places and give the students the option of anonymity, it's a hard word, to be able to ask them and have a great source, a great panel of students to answer those questions. And now, Adina, you were involved in some of these panels in the past as an incoming student, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We kind of started this culture of, if you have a Google Hangout, just come in. And so the very first one, we kind of weren't sure whether or not it was okay to come in and be in the video part of the Google Hangout. So I was the only one who did it, but I just kind of asked questions in the group chat that you have when you do a Google Hangout, and then a lot of people answered or asked questions on Facebook, and then I also had the opportunity to be on one of the panels last year when I was first year. And so that was cool to kind of feel like I'm doing it every step of my Oberlin experience, which has been really fun.
That's awesome. That's like coming in for a tour and becoming a student ambassador and then doing those steps. You took the virtual route of doing that, and I love it. In fact, you were on a previous Admissions Live, weren't you, when we were talking a few years back? Awesome. It just came full circle. It's
exactly.
But I think that's a great point you brought up too about, maybe there were different topics being discussed and you're not sure, like, do I belong in this chat, but I kind of want to still be talking. And I know that there's a few different topics covered. You mentioned the international panel, but it seems like you guys are pretty open with, what's being discussed and what happens on these panels as far as the conversation that happens. Is that correct, or do you try to direct it a little bit more? Who wants to take that first?
So, last year, we ran into a problem that the first chat was incredibly well questioned. Like, we had like 20 questions come in, and then no questions came in for the second and third panel. So, like, Tanya and I are sitting there completely scrambling, like, how do we rephrase these previous questions that we got? And actually, this year in particular, we kind of made a section of our kind of training document that says, if we don't get questions, here are some major things that we will ask about that everyone has questions about, because they come up every single time we do anything here on campus. And actually, a lot of those questions kind of get rephrased in way better ways by students who are actually asking the questions. So there's almost always going to be a question about housing. There's almost always going to be a question about study away or like winter term travel experiences. There's almost always a question about like, what do you do professionally? Like, how do you get a job after college? That kind of thing. And like, we've figured out all of that because we heard it in the past. So we've just kind of framed it in such a way that it's pretty easy to tackle it again. This year also is the first year we actually had specific themed panels. The first 2 years we did this, it was very much about just like general student life, ask your questions. But we recognize that there are specific groups of students that might have very specific questions for other students like them. So this past year, we started doing a panel of students in generally underrepresented communities on campus, and also one for international students as well, because there are very specific things you might want to ask of other students in those spaces.
The panels are open generally, so it's not like you can't attend a panel, you can't watch a panel if you don't identify as one of those groups, but that's sort of the population of student panelists that we have.
Yeah.
So if there are specific questions, they're there to answer them.
Yeah, but even in each of those panels, some of the same topics come up every single time. They might just have a slightly different bent. So community service for some groups is more like, this is exactly how I've done my life all the time, but it also brings you job opportunities, which might be more important to different groups.
Yeah, no, I think that's great that you kind of go in with the preparation behind you. I know when we've done video chats, especially if it's open access to asking questions during the actual video, we prep ourselves ahead of time, so if it's just nothing coming in, we know what we should be covering. So it's always great to think ahead and make sure that you can avoid that awkwardness of just sitting there like, so many questions?
Well, the questions come from, so for us, it's like we've done this now several times, but for someone who's just getting started and like deciding that maybe next year they want to do a virtual panel, these are the questions that you get emailed to your office every single year. These are the questions that you hear every time you go out on a tour. It's not uncommon to have these questions, but having multiple perspectives from different students on these questions really helps.
Oh, definitely. So, definitely. Yeah.
We've answered the question about what do you do for winter term every single time, but every single time someone has a good answer.
And probably a different answer.
And everybody has a different answer, which is fantastic. And we also at this point have 2 kind of stock final questions that kind of like wrap up the chat really nicely, which I love, and I think everyone should ask these questions. So for the fall panels, we asked, what was one thing you wish you could tell your senior yourself? So for students who are in the application process, what sorts of things, like it's going to be okay. You need to reread your essay for typos. Like visit as many places as you can, but you don't need to visit all of them. And then for the spring panels, our final question is, what do you wish you'd known your first week at school? Kind of like thinking forward to what people are going to be doing during orientation. And those have been really interesting because some people will be like very philosophical about it, and some people are like, yeah, I really should have slept more.
I should have gotten more waterproof boots.
Yeah. Actually, we had that during one of the first panel in April this year. Somebody said, I wish I'd known how much it rained here because growing up in a city that was mostly concrete, I didn't know that worms came out of the ground when it rained, and she thought it was the apocalypse. So that's the kind of thing that's really useful to know because it could be very startling, but you'd never ever think to ask about it.
No, I love it. I love it. And yeah, those are the questions that you just don't, you don't even, it really causes you to think like, what do I wish I could go back and tell myself? Because I probably would have had something like that too, just like, oh yeah, make sure you bring shower shoes because otherwise you're going to be trying to fashion them out of like plastic you find in your dorm. You know, there's that kind of advice that you can only get from students. Oh, but I love it. Well, and I love that the conversation is talking about prep because I think for anybody thinking to do this, you're like, okay, I can handle it. But if you don't prepare yourself well enough to do these panels, all of a sudden you find yourself scrambling or trying to figure out how to address these different issues. So I wanted to break down the preparation you have going into these a little bit. And so I guess we'll just start with kind of, you know, technical considerations. How did you decide on, oh, you talked a little bit about how you decided on Google Hangouts, but what's kind of the technical thought process that goes into it?
Yeah, so the technical piece is mostly me. This is where it gets a little complicated. So Oberlin uses a Google Apps for Education email address. So our Oberlin.edu addresses use like tons of Google products. The only thing that they don't use though is Google Plus and YouTube. So all of our panels have actually been hosted through my personal Google Plus page and my personal YouTube account. I don't love this, but I also think the panels are so cool that I will keep on doing it, and it's fine. The links end up on the Oberlin blogs. It actually means like getting the data out is really easy because it's all tied to my own account. I don't love that it's all tied to me, but for now, it works out. On the technical and beyond that, we selected Google Plus Hangouts because it really made the most sense, but it turns out that there's also really excellent data and analytics that comes along with this. We can see where people are watching from. We can see how long people watch. Those are really useful things for us. And the last piece is we shifted from solely doing YouTube to embedding on the Oberlin blogs. That's helped quite a bit, and we actually there's a very loud noise in the hallway. Sound a little like a party. We also have like a document for all of the students who are doing prep. The main thing for us is that we want the students to just show up and do what they need to do. It's less on them and more on the two of us like getting our act together. So in the document it talks about all the technical things. Have headphones with you. Don't sit in front of a window. Like have some lighting on your face. And
guilty.
Yeah. Make sure that your roommates know that you're doing this and maybe don't walk in and like start talking loudly. And then the last one is like if you can be somewhere with a stable internet connection, and if you cut out, like just join it again. We'll segue you back in. The one technical difficulty that we had once that was terrible and I didn't realize it was going to happen, my computer shut down in the middle of one of our panels once. And as the host of the panel, the video just goes to technical difficulties, please stand by, but the entire chat keeps on going. So the students just realized that I dropped out, but didn't know that it wasn't broadcasting anymore. So there's like a lost like 8 minutes in the middle of one of our broadcasts once. It was okay. We made it work, but I had almost a heart attack just thinking like, wait, if my computer shut down, does that mean that everything stopped? And no one knows how to tell people that it stopped because I was the one who was supposed to tell people that it had stopped. So yeah, I warn people of that now. If for some reason I drop out, like continue going, though I will be back in a moment.
That's a good preparation to give them. That actually, I don't know how many viewers out there of Higher Ed Live know this, but we are Google based. I think you probably have figured it out from the lower third. But that happened to me once, and I didn't have the ability to warn the guest that I was gone and he had to finish the show, and I don't know if it caught his tail end and didn't know until after the fact. So I think that's really great advice to give because, yeah, you need to make sure you can prep for, you gotta hope for the best but plan for the worst, I think, and that's true of real life events and it's true of virtual events just as much.
Very much so. Yeah. The one last thing that we do technically, the group chat element of the panels is actually really useful for us. Tanya and I are very uninteresting compared to all of the students who are going to share during our panels. So we actually just introduce and close the panel out, but we're silent the rest of the time. So we communicate with the students through essentially a back channel chat. It's mainly to relay questions if people want to hop in and say, like, I definitely have something to say. But also it turns into, like, a really interesting back channel. Last fall we had, like, a diatribe into, like, the sociology of some book that someone was reading. This past time somebody was sitting in the library and, like, a stink bug appeared. So it was, like, a lot of drama around the stink bug that had appeared.
We were tracing his eye movements as
he
was.
So we knew what was going on, but, like, no one in the outside world knew what was going on. We just knew it because of the chat. So the chat for us helps us stay organized and communicate back and forth even if we're not speaking with our mouths.
And it also means that once the video is archived, we can go back in and timestamp or figure out when each of the questions was answered.
Yeah.
So for viewers who are coming to the video a few days after the live stream itself, if there's a question they specifically want to know about, they can hop right to that place in the live stream or in the video at that point.
Yeah.
I love that. I've seen that in some of your older blogs, and I think that's massively helpful to just be able to see, like, okay, minute 45 seconds in, this is exactly the topic I was hoping we would cover, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So that's good technical prep, and you talked a little bit about the student prep too. Is there anything else that maybe, I guess I'm curious, how do you decide which students are on there? Do you just let them volunteer? Do you have specific students, like clearly Adina loves being involved in these things, so do you have students that just are always involved? How does that kind of happen?
It's sort of so in the admissions office we have a number of students who volunteer with us. We actually have opportunities for them to sign up at the beginning of every academic year to say, I would love to do panels in the future. We also kind of keep an eye out for the students that we remember through application season, either from interviews or from coming to campus, who are particularly vocal, and then we see them doing things on campus, and we see them as pretty great ambassadors for the college. And so kind of as a group, I'll go around and say, who do you know who would be a fantastic panelist? Who would you want to have speaking about Oberlin? And then we typically send out an invitation to about 10, 15 students looking for panelists. If we're doing an hour-long panel, we try to cap the panelists at 4 students. For an hour-and-a-half panel, cap it at 6. That's usually enough to get a really good diversity of opinions and experiences, but not too much that students aren't able to speak. So we just want to make sure there's a good balance of that. We also try to get a range of class years, a range of geographic backgrounds, where they're coming from, where home was, public schools, private schools, as much as possible, and a good gender balance as much as possible. It also depends on who's free when. We also made a decision pretty early on that the fall panels were not going to have first-year students. We wanted them to have more experience and have more to talk about. So we invite them and kind of stack the April yield panels with a few more first-year students
who very recently did this college decision-making process. So
yeah, that totally makes sense.
Last year as a result of that,
Yeah, because it's going to be the freshest in the minds of the first-year students. But yeah, fall, you're like, I'm 2 months in. I don't know. I still don't know where this building is, so maybe it isn't the right time. Makes a lot of sense. Been there. We talked about the technical side and the student side. How about the marketing side? I know you have so many social channels, and I know it kind of gets distributed all throughout, but how far in advance do you think about it? How do you put it out there? What's that sort of marketing plan?
So probably about 3 weeks before the first panel, we have an email that goes out. In the fall, it's to all of our prospective students, and it'll list these are the dates, these are sort of who we are anticipating talking to in these panels, but anyone is invited. We'll also put it up, it's a blog post, so it's going to be on the blogs. Closer to the date itself, we'll send out another reminder email, we'll send out Facebook posts, Twitter posts, Tumblr posts, pretty much anywhere we can. And then typically we do another round of emails just a couple days before the panel itself. For the international students, I will actually also reach out to Education USA offices so that they might be able to host a panel, or they might be able to screen it for their students if they have the most stable internet connection in that particular country or region. Also to counselors that I know as well. We don't typically do that for the other panels, for the panels that are kind of more domestically based, but for the international students, just because there's such a huge population that we don't ever get to see, I will target specific counselors for that, and Education USA offices, anyone, pretty much, just to spread the word.
I also do the word of mouth thing when I'm present at any of the admitted students events. These are more for the April panels on the fall ones, but I kind of mentioned that if you're here, you're probably a little bit overwhelmed with all the different questions you could ask, and you might realize when you leave, like, oh, there was something I was actually thinking about but didn't actually have the chance to ask, or it came up after I left. So this is the reason that we have our last one so late. It's right before our final visit day. So by that point, anyone who has visited can kind of follow up online as well if they're thinking about it.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And they're always in my away messages whenever I'm on the road to travel.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, get even in the email signature. Just get it all over the place. I love it. Well, and I'm going to go off book for a minute because I'm curious, Ma'ayan. I want to ask you a question. With these in-person events, I know that you've talked with our community manager, and she's super involved in our accepted student events too, but for other colleges out there, I want to first of all encourage them to connect with whoever is in your role at the college, because clearly you two have a great relationship. I know our community manager, whose name also is Nicole, it's funny, we have a great relationship, so this relationship between these two positions is vitally important. But I'm curious, like, do you get to just talk to people at the events on campus? Do you have a specific role, specific things you do? I'm just curious of what your job is, because I'm sure Tanya may be a little bit more specifically scheduled out with specific admissions pieces, but what's your role there?
It's actually changed a lot this year, in particular because the programming around these daily events have changed. There's a lot more choice in what you can do on campus. My primary existence during admitted student days previously was showing up at meals and kind of serving as a knowledgeable campus resource and also like proof that an Oberlin education gets you a job. So that's been good. I've been talking about that. And also I have a wider range of friends who went here in terms of class years. So someone asked like, what do Oberlin people do after graduation? I can like pull from the last 8 years of people that I know. So this year in particular, though, the lunches, like the formal lunches, are less attended because there are so many more lunch options. So I've actually ended up at tables with multiple students the past couple days, and it's just been nice to like kind of mix in the first and second year experiences with the senior experiences with the 5 years out experiences. So we're kind of like spreading out all the different stories that we have. And in the past, one of the things that happened, I don't know if it's still happening during the breakfasts or not, was just anyone who works in relation to the school, whether you're a student or a staff member or faculty, kind of go up to the microphone during a break and introduce yourself along with everyone else. So you can give a face to a name, or if you want to talk to someone specifically who does neuroscience but also went abroad, you can find those people in the room. And I did that mainly to be like, hi, I'm a person that exists on the blogs, and also I have a face, and I would love to direct you to anybody. Like, I know where the resources are, and I know where the people are. If you want to talk to somebody, I can point you in the right direction. Yeah, I think that's the bulk of what I do now. The main Oberlin admissions or the main Oberlin College accounts don't focus solely on admissions-related things during this month, though a lot of our content is like definitely geared towards prospective students thinking about going to school here.
Makes a lot of sense. Awesome. Thank you. And I want to reiterate, if you don't already know your community manager and you're in a role like Tanya or I, find them and be their best friend.
At the very least, just so you know, like the name behind who is doing a lot of like of the external outreach for your school. It's just good to know.
Also, font of knowledge. So whenever I'm thinking about a blog post, or whenever I'm writing one of these emails and I want to put older blog posts in to drive students to the blogs, this is my resource. Working with the blogs forever means that I know the like 1,500 posts that are there pretty well, and I also have data that tells us what kinds of things are being read that I don't necessarily know as well. So
that's awesome. Well, and that kind of
know things.
Yes. Always good to have somebody that knows things and can answer those questions. And I actually, last year at orientation, Nicole and I walked around with signs pretty much saying that we were from the internet, and people remembered us.
That's a very effective strategy.
Yeah, I am from the, I think we talked about this year incorporating cats into the signs because, you know, cats and the internet go hand in hand.
If you walk around with a kitten, I'm pretty sure you would make a lot of friends.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yes, okay. Ideas. Great. So I want to leap into yes. I have no doubt. It's how Nicole and my meetings go too. So I actually, you kind of made me want to segue a little bit and back into, we talked about it a little bit earlier about the questions that keep popping up. But Dina, I specifically want to start with you about you know, topics that come up a lot, but also surprise questions that you didn't expect to see on those.
I'm trying to think. I think the most surprising question was actually a question that got kind of reshaped, and then Ma'ayan or Tanya asked it, which is like kind of, what would you tell your past senior self, or what would you tell yourself like in freshman year? And that was kind of the one that made me think like, oh, what would I tell myself, you know, the Adina starting out in orientation week of like, yes, that building is there, and it's between these two buildings, and that's where you can go to get, you know, your meals, and things like that. I think that was the most kind of intriguing question to me. You do kind of get the same like, oh, what's the, you know, drinking culture, or what are the dorms like? What, you know, can you do study away? What's winter term like? I think also the other question was that I was surprised to hear that not a lot of other schools do winter term, or something like that. So I thought it was just a normal thing because it's so integrated into Oberlin and into our culture here, that to hear people be like, what exactly is winter term? What do you do? Was kind of surprising to me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because I think you get so in the realm of this is what the institution's like, you forget that there's things that, you can just throw out an acronym or a word and not every
Exactly.
student says.
Lingo is
Yes.
real. It's actually something that we have started utilizing the group chat for, that if somebody mentions an acronym, we'll be like, define it. Because this stuff becomes kind of second nature once you're here on campus, but even today, I started talking about OSCA and dining halls, and they were like, I don't know what these words are. I was like, oh, right, that's cooperative association, which covers dining and housing plans. So yeah, it's the kind of thing where it's us interacting with the outside world quite a bit when it comes to working with prospective students, can kind of insert the reminders that, like, yes, we want you to be as authentic as possible, but you also might have to serve as, like, informative as well as your personal experiences.
Yeah, it's so easy to just be in that mindset and forget, like, not everybody knows what CCM means when everybody at Champlain knows what that is. So I love that you make sure to keep everybody in check, keep everybody informed. And what sort of, I want to kind of jump back to you again, Nadina, and then go to the other two ladies about what is the feedback you specifically have heard from, like, your classmates with the initial group, venturing into Google Hangouts and then being involved in these panels? What's some of the feedback you've heard from other students?
I think the feedback has mostly been like, wow, this is incredibly helpful. Wow, this is kind of bringing us into something that, like, bringing it into the modern era a little bit, in that kind of it was something that my class really kind of initiated, and we became friends through the Google Hangouts, but it also transitioned not only into being something that we could do just to make friends, but we could do to help other students. And so to, like, connect with people who are, miles away, thousands of miles away, especially, is really, really helpful. And so the internet, and especially these Google Hangouts, has been a really big bridging gap to say, like, yes, this is what, it's like to be in OSCA. This is what it's really like to live, live in the dorms, et cetera, et cetera.
Awesome. And how about you, Tanya and Ma'ayan? What kind of feedback, anything else to add to that?
The thing that I'm actually coming back to, so we did a very specific panel for students who were applying through QuestBridge. That, to me, had the greatest emotional impact of anything we've done. The turnout for that was very low, but considering the audience was very specific, it was actually a really awesome turnout. And of that awesome turnout, I think all but one student who tuned in immediately emailed the office afterward to talk more extensively about that process. That, to me, like, I was super impressed, just because even though there was very little, like, back and forth interaction, we answered questions that these students didn't even know that they had about the process, and it prompted them to think more in depth about what they were working on right then.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome. And again, that return on investment immediately, just it was worth the time that you put in to do that. Awesome.
Absolutely.
Awesome. And you mentioned kind of amounts of panels that you've done and numbers in that sense, but would you mind sharing maybe some numbers of, views, time spent watching these videos?
I wrote this up in preparation.
Oh, you're so prepared.
So the first year, it really was a pilot. Like, we were just trying out to see what would happen. Apparently the answer was yes, people wanted this. But the only thing is I didn't know how to see how many viewers were watching live when we did our first panel. So based on the comments that we got, like how many comments we got and, like, how many people liked the status and stuff, it appears that we had 20 people like tune in. At that time, and that at the very least was like, yeah, it seems like some people would tune in if we actually focused on, like, data. We might have a better answer the next time. So in spring 2014, we had 126 people tune in live for the 3 panels, which was 27 hours of content watched by people. In fall 2014, oh gosh, we had 84 people watch live, 375 people watching the archive panels following it, and that's a total of, like, 2.2 days of video watched, compared to 11 hours watched live. And I think we haven't gotten the data back yet, because YouTube gives us a little bit of lag time in between doing it live and then giving us the archive footage. The most important numbers to me actually have more to do with how many people came in via the blogs and how many people stuck around to watch. The average watch time is something like 12 to 20 minutes, depending on where you are in the world. That's a lot of information. And when we realized that like this is a really cool piece of like Google Analytics that shows like where people tuned in and where people tuned out. Which now that we do our highlights reel, we point out like at this timestamp, this is the question that's being asked. We can actually see which ones people are going toward. So putting those two things together, the fact that people watch 10 minutes and the fact that people don't tune in for everything, we started doing the highlights reel so that if you watched only 10 minutes, it was the most valuable 10 minutes. Because if you just watch the first 10 minutes, you're getting like 5 minutes of introductions and then 5 minutes of people saying why they chose Oberlin, and you're not actually getting into the meat of like why you might be there today. We start with the introductions and we start with why I choose Oberlin, just to give the audience a little bit of perspective into who they're talking to, and maybe also spark some very specific questions. But the important like meaty stuff is a lot later in the panel. And even since doing the highlight reels, it seems like people are jumping around to very specific spots and like staying at that spot until they're done, which is great.
Awesome. Yeah. Good data is so valuable.
It's fun.
Yes. Well, and especially, I mean, totally important for the social media and general strategy role. But I mean, I know that most directors of admission, most VPs will love those numbers. And so if they can see those, it shows that it's time well spent and, you know, focus that they don't want to pull away from. And I think that's wonderful too. Yeah. What mistakes have you learned from?
I mentioned already that sometimes it turns off in the middle of a chat. So the one really hard thing for me is that international students don't necessarily have access to YouTube, and that's not the best. Like, we're making these things that are accessible to most people, but not everybody. Yeah, I think I wouldn't even say that's a mistake. That's just something I really wish that we could figure out. And because there isn't really like another good free internet solution that everybody on campus can use that is also accessible to everyone, like, I'm not sure how to solve that one yet. Yeah.
Cool.
I think one that we struggle with, this is just a technical piece, is just audio. And with Google Hangouts, you have, you know, the flipping between viewers, whoever's speaking, and if someone coughs, that flips the video to them.
Yeah.
And I know occasionally when some of my coworkers go to watch the video, they're like, wait a second, I'm looking at people who aren't even talking, and it's really confusing, and where am I supposed to be concentrating?
Yeah.
So just, you know, it's not the perfect platform.
Yeah.
It's very accessible, it's easy, it's not perfect. So reminding ourselves that we're trying to create an access to information as best as we can.
Yeah.
And just kind of concentrating on that piece of it.
Yeah.
Well, and who knows, maybe over the next, you know, period of time we'll find a better platform, but I think it does. It serves the purpose in a good way.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Adina just used the chat to tell me something important. Download the video from YouTube, you can re-upload on another site. Okay, we might have a solution. Good stuff.
There you go.
Okay, this has been an incredibly useful conversation simply for that detail. Adina, you are awesome.
This is getting so meta too, because it's flipping back and forth between us. It's a meta virtual panel about virtual panels, and yes.
This is actually one of my favorite things about panels. Not just that prospective students are learning from current students, but current students get to learn from current students.
Yeah.
And I love the spring panels where you've got first years as well as seniors and third years and fifth years, and they're sitting together in these panels. And especially one of the questions we like to ask is about resources on campus, where students have found resources, what resources they wished other students knew about or that they'd known about earlier. And watching the first years especially learn something new about the campus is really magical.
We had that happen actually in both the panels this April already. Somebody learned about a specific kind of tutoring that didn't exist, and someone else talked about like different events that they didn't know about and like the one site that really helped them with that. So it's been really nice. This was a question that like I got a ton as a student ambassador, as a junior and senior on campus here. What is a secret or underutilized resource here? And that's a great question to ask anybody because everyone has a different answer. And if you think that it's a secret or underutilized, there's a good chance the person you're talking to doesn't know about it yet. So that's been really nice. I think the only the only other thing I really wish that we could figure out, I really, really love the panels that are an hour and a half long, but I want to figure out a way that we can do like shorter, more like punchy things as well. I don't know that everyone wants to sit through that much information. And yeah, I think this, I mean, even just doing the fall panels was like a really big experiment for us this year. We saw a need in the spring. We figured maybe we should try it in the fall, and I think that there is a need there. I don't know. Maybe there's a need for this during the summer. Maybe there's a way to like do very specific. I think we learned this with the Questbridge panel, actually, doing very specific like college counseling, maybe around Oberlin, but also generally around very specific programming, could be really useful in the future. Almost all of our panels have been current students, but there might be an opportunity for admissions counselors to also be involved with current students side by side, maybe simply just an advice one. I don't know. There's other ways to explore this still, and we really have focused mainly on the current student piece of it because it is the place where we saw the need, and we already had a platform where student voices are of the utmost importance. So it made it pretty easy to kind of shift the narrative from just writing to people speaking as well.
Love it. You just gave me such a light bulb moment. This is the beauty of these things.
Great.
Yes. I do also have to share some tweets because I know you will all appreciate them, and I hope our viewers continue to share thoughts and questions over on the Higher Ed Live hashtag. But Andy Gilbert said, "Online kitten panel, just saying." Genius.
I think we should have done this in the Ginkgo gallery.
Ma'ayan, just get the kittens from Ginkgo. I'm telling you.
No, well, you know, I've always thought about going from home for these panels, and now I'm thinking, I have two wonderfully snuggly, lovely cats that are probably going to crawl across my lap anyway. Why don't I just take advantage of the power of cats on the internet and make sure they're incorporated in future video panels?
And no one is allergic on the internet, so that's another one.
No one can get scratched through a webcam. So we're good. We got it covered. I love it. He did also ask a question. I think this was kind of general, but I'm curious if you guys have done this too. He asked, is anyone doing their undergrad panels over Twitter with specific hashtags? Is that something that you guys have ever done?
No. I love Oberlin people, but the reasons why we use social media have very little to do with interacting with each other. As far as I have seen at Oberlin, we tend to gravitate towards social media when we're really angry about injustice in the world or around really creative endeavors. And while the panels could be around social injustice or about really creative stuff, there's so little engagement in this manner already within our audience that we just haven't done it. I have seen places do it really well, specifically like the Q&A Twitter chat. I've seen it mainly around admissions officers speaking with prospective students, and I think that's a really great approach. I wish we could do it here, but it requires our audience being there.
Our financial aid office used to do Facebook open hours.
Yeah.
Where they would take questions on their Facebook page.
Yeah.
That hasn't happened recently. I don't think it...
Yeah, so we did that around 3 years ago. It was relatively effective, but in the shifts from Facebook pages to Facebook groups for current students, it made it a lot harder to kind of privatize or publicize the conversation. Yeah, I think there's definitely an opportunity for something like financial aid because it's something that everybody has some relationship to and might be very confused by it.
Definitely. Well, I know that a lot of organizations out there are doing Twitter chats too, though. Like I'm First does an first generation office hour. So there are, I think, outside services that do that as well. But yeah, I think it is a good question and it may work for some schools, but you bring up a valid point and it shows that you clearly have knowledge of your community. And I think that's really vitally important when having these thoughts about how we're going to connect with accepted students too. You know, you really have to put thought into that because otherwise you may have surprises coming around that you didn't really predict.
Let's Twitter chat. No one shows up.
Exactly. Yeah, there's all sorts of things that can happen. I do also want to kind of share, this is more of a comment than a question, but I think it reflects into the student panels too, since this is our meta virtual panel, that Anne, whose Twitter handle is not Annie but Anne, which I love, said, many thanks to Higher Ed Live for using Google+/Hangouts. I can pause the live video feed when students call, which is true of the show, but also I think true, you know, if the students are watching live and then may need to go and do other things, they can still check out your panels. Of course, they can check it out in the archive, but if they want to watch it live, they're not totally losing track, I think, which is nice too.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah, just another nice plug for Google Plus and for Hangouts, and at least the technology does a lot of nice things in the meantime until we find something that suits our needs even better. But anybody else, if you have any questions, please feel free to tweet them at the Higher Ed Live hashtag as we're winding down. I want to kind of talk about sort of bigger questions as far as I don't know, achieving goals especially. So how have these panels more specifically helped you to achieve the goals of Oberlin and specifically of the admissions office? And Tanya, I didn't know if you want to start with that.
I think for us, the big part of the panels is just getting information out there. A really big piece of this is just making sure that students that we don't necessarily get to reach have access, have a chance to ask questions. We get a ton of questions through email, but this is a chance for students to get a lot of different answers. If it's coming through an email, it's either one of us counselors answering or maybe an intern. But if it's a current student, it's a very different kind of answer. It's typically a very different kind of question as well. So just making that accessible is the primary goal of especially the fall panels, is just making the information there so that students, as they're making decisions, are able to be intentional about those decisions. In the spring, the goal is, again, giving information to students who are at that point where they're deciding, and we want them to make the right decision for them. And the best way to do that is to know what they're getting in for, to know what the community looks like, what resources, what experiences, what are the cool things on campus, who are the people who might be their classmates. And getting to see that and to get such a range of different Oberlins, I think is really important. And for me, I grew up overseas. When I was doing my college search, it was very much, very much a different game entirely. But I wanted, for me, one of the big goals was making sure that the chance for students to see the campus in some ways. And I love that our students will do the virtual panels from the library, from the basement of a dorm, from a computer lab, from their dorm room itself or a kitchen. And so really just seeing a lot of different places on campus. And that's a kind of an insider's look inside the room itself, inside the facilities, and just creating that is really great for us.
I think for me, I come at this more from the blogging and communications perspective. I love our blogs. I think our students are some of the best human beings in the entire world, and those are just the ones I get to work with every day. All of them are great. But the blogs, like, our blogs have been around for 6 years. Blogging seems kind of old hat when it comes to social media, and video seems to be, like, live streaming in general, way more popular, way more on people's minds right now. But you got to have a place for that stuff to live, and I really like that our blogs are kind of like, we're keeping the things that are working really well, but we're also experimenting with different kinds of media as well. Yeah, I've found that really nice. The one downside of the Oberlin blogs is that we have 25 voices, and I would love to have more, but it's very hard to bring on more people regularly and keep them forever. And I think that the panels in particular have brought in wider ranges of voices for a shorter amount of time, which means that you can meet lots more people and know that, like, there is more Oberlin than just these 25 student writers. We've had some of our bloggers be on panels. It actually gives them voice in a very different way. We have a blogger who's really interested in doing radio journalism, and she's only been writing on the blog so far, but did a panel with us, and now she's like, you know what, this is pretty cool. I can see myself actually using my voice in this manner moving forward, so thank you for giving me that opportunity. Yeah, I think the other thing is, like, good content begets more good content. Like, bringing somebody in with something good really does keep people there. And if the blogs are the entry point, if the virtual panels are the entry point to the Oberlin blogs, like, you just got an hour's worth of important information. But if one of those things in particular seems really important, you could search on the blogs for, like, I want to know about all the first-year housing options. And there's photos, there's video, there's writing, there's all sorts of different ways to kind of enter the story that makes the most sense for you. So yeah, that's been the blogging and the blogging and communication side of things. I think it's achieving our goals really well. It brings people in, and then they stay in the space longer and learn even more about this place hopefully so they want to go here.
Yes. Hey, I want to go there, and I am way out of date as far as probably being able to be a traditional undergrad, but I think you definitely achieved that. And I love the idea of using these videos as a gateway or a door to all this other content. And I think that's so important too, is that you're not only doing these video chats, but that you're actually giving students resources that they can continue to do this investigation into. And I love that about the Oberlin blogs, and the fact that these live in the Oberlin blogs is really great. I had one question that I wanted to ask you, and I think it's probably one word. It sounds like you pretty much
Oh no.
You asked a question and then we couldn't hear it.
Technical problems in real life.
Oh no. We'll just guess that she was asking us how great was the show, and the answer was super great.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
There we go. All right, we're going without headphones. There we go.
Okay.
The beauty of doing video panels. Woohoo! No, I had asked, yes, and I think the show went great. No, but I was asking, do you intend to continue doing these video panels and these virtual panels? Which I'm sure the answer is a yes.
Yes. We have one later this week. I think the main thing for us is that we're trying to figure out how this can get adopted into different parts of the process. The fall ones were the first time we did this, and we already know the spring ones work. The fall ones, we've got some kinks to work out, but like there's some good stuff that happened during those. And I think the Questbridge one, which was like, we decided very much on a whim, like 3 days before it was happening, that we were going to do it. And we'd already had enough practice doing the chats, asking people, like doing all the technical behind-the-scenes stuff, that putting together something new wasn't that difficult. I would love to see this happen for different kinds of things moving forward. And actually, the one thing that we've kind of not been able to do since that first experiment was something that Adina mentioned. We would love like the students to be able to join the actual chat as it's happening. The only kind of difficult thing about this is if you're streaming live, you're supposed to be over the age of 18. Not all of our incoming students are over the age of 18 when they're making their college decision. If they're like, the trade-off is doing the panels live so everyone can watch it, or doing private panels where everyone can join. And I think right now the public one is still a little bit more important, though having the like one-on-one connections or small group connections, I think would be super cool if we could figure out how to do that.
Definitely. Well, thoughts and wonderful goals to have in the future.
Yeah.
And I will, since we're wrapping up, we're very rapidly approaching 2 o'clock, I want to just end with, for any schools out there that are thinking of trying this on their own and trying to see if it works with their populations, what sort of advice would you give, kind of high level? What are the most important things that you've learned and maybe talked about today that you want to make sure you reiterate to anybody thinking about that?
I mean, if you don't have an answer, I can jump in.
No, go ahead. I'm going to figure out mine.
Is that I think talking to your students is the most effective thing to do, because you don't know which social media and which outlet is going to be the best for your particular population. So especially with my class, the Facebook group was kind of the primary place where people were getting together, but Facebook isn't the primary place for every school. Sometimes it's Twitter, sometimes it's Tumblr. You know, it changes per school and per community. So I think talking to your students and saying what is the thing that you most definitely need and that you think would be the most effective, because it's for them, so it should be something that they use the most often.
Yeah.
Makes a whole lot of sense. I love it.
Yep, I completely agree with that. Yeah, a lot of this came from simply listening to what people were doing, kind of observing that people were using video chat and people did want to talk to current students. I think a lot of it was just like taking cues from the community that we were already working with, and that made it a lot easier to kind of decide that this was the manner. I think my advice is that you don't really have to reinvent the wheel. Like, student panels are not a new thing for us. We do them. We do them during All Roads in particular. So it really was, how do we shape that into a slightly different form so it can be more accessible to more people who might not be able to visit campus. And also for me, like, I care a lot about like making sure like students have like other kinds of technical skills, which you might not get as a student here. helping people learn how to use a Google Plus Hangout, like maybe that will lead you to doing a Google Plus Hangout for a job interview in the future. So I'm really into like the small bits of training that come with this. And again, not reinventing the wheel, just like finding opportunities to take what you're already doing and like compartmentalize it differently, modular stuff.
And kind of going with that, one of the things that I really appreciate about the panels is getting to know students that I don't typically get to see on campus.
Yeah.
So be willing to take the risks and invite students on because they're going to have experiences that I haven't heard about yet. And as an admissions counselor, that's amazing because then I get to take those on the road with me. Those are stories I get to tell later. But it's also a way of bringing students into our office, so to get student volunteers. And this is a really good, again, a gateway for our current students to be more active with the admissions office later.
Yeah.
So thinking about hosting, thinking about tour guides, this is a really great way to bring them in and start them off doing something that they're already really comfortable doing, which is talking about themselves and talking about their experience on campus.
Yeah. The nice thing, like selfishly, I love that we've been doing these panels because it does give me a little bit of different perspective into like what our students' lives are like. But after the last panel we did, not this past Saturday, but the one before, I went out to 2 concerts and a performance on campus during the weekend and saw 3 of the 6 students that we had involved in the panel. And to me, that was just like a really perfect affirmation that like we selected great, I mean, Oberlin students do lots of things, but it was nicely serendipitous. And like the parallel to me is if you were on campus here for an All Roads event and you went to a virtual student panel and heard some students speak about their experience and then you went to a show in the evening and saw them performing in it, it is kind of that affirmation of like these are real people who do real things and they just so happen to like share an hour of their day with us, and that to me is pretty magical.
Awesome. The whole idea of it is pretty magical. Awesome. Any last thoughts before we close out, or feeling like giving the best advice, best thoughts out there? Good?
These are fun. I want to know when other people do them because it's been nothing but fantastic over here in our world, and I would love to see it happen elsewhere as well.
You've inspired me to do them. I've always wanted to get our students involved. We tried to do one last year, but I didn't nearly have the preparation ahead of time, and you've already inspired me to have these thoughts going in. And Adina, I love what you mentioned about tapping into the student knowledge and resources and seeing what's the best platform to do these. So I know I'm inspired, so hopefully a lot of other viewers got inspired as well. Well, thank you all for joining me today for today's episode. It's an awesome one. My face is gonna hurt from like permanent. But I hope all of our viewers enjoyed, and I know that I know that Tanya and Ma'ayan are on Twitter. Adina, are you on Twitter as well?
I don't think so. I kind of deleted it a little bit ago because I was spending too much time searching hashtags for latest movements and stuff. But if people want to send me messages on Facebook, my Facebook name is Adina Katz. Feel free to send me a message if you want to know any more.
Awesome, thank you. And I shared the Twitter handles for Ma'ayan and Tanya earlier. Tanya Breakfast Quest is like one of my favorite Twitter handles I've seen out there. So definitely tweet at her, even if it's just to tell her how awesome her handle is, but also if you have any questions for any of my guests. And find Adina on Facebook. So thank you all. Thanks as always to our program sponsors, Stoner and Chegg Enrollment Services. Coming up next on Higher Ed Live tomorrow, host Ryan Catherwood speaks with Kathy Kale, Alumni Director at Santa Clara University, about digital engagement by replicating LinkedIn influencers and Pulse concepts. Get reminders about this and other great shows by subscribing to the Higher Ed Live newsletter. Browse the archives at higheredlive.com or subscribe to the Higher Ed Live podcast on iTunes. I'm Nicole Lentine, back next month with more Admissions Live. Thank you.